I arrived at my sister Emily's wedding reception earlier than most guests, mostly because I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I wasn't expecting hugs, teary reunions, or even a simple hello, not from a family who had spent years training themselves to forget I existed, but I still assumed I would at least get inside without an issue. The venue was one of those expensive countryside barns that rich families rent when they want something that feels rustic, even though nothing about them is rustic except the wood they imported from Italy. I walked up to the reception desk, tugging down my sleeves, trying to look presentable, trying not to look like the outsider I already knew they saw me as. The staff member smiled politely and asked for my name. "Yeah, I'm Alex," I said, giving my full name slowly, expecting her to highlight it with a yellow marker and welcome me in. Instead, her forehead creased. Her eyes flicked to the list, scanned down, then up again. She checked another sheet, then another tablet, then looked at me with that uncomfortable smile people use when they know something is wrong but don't want to say it directly. "I'm sorry, your name isn't on the list." I blinked. No, there must be a mistake. My sister is the bride." She checked again, tapping the paper like maybe my name would magically appear if she pressed harder. "Sir, I'm really sorry, but you're not registered as a guest. Maybe check with the family?" The humiliation crawled up the back of my neck like fire ants. I could already feel eyes shifting in my direction, people whispering, wondering why the uninvited guy was holding up the line. I stepped aside, inhaling deeply, forcing myself not to explode. I dialed my mother and spotted her stepping out of a nearby cluster of relatives. She came over slowly, expression flat, like she was bored before I even opened my mouth. "They don't have my name," I said quietly. She gave me a slow, deliberate smirk, the type she used when she used to punish me as a child for things I didn't do. "Alex, did you really think you were invited?" My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a whisper only I could hear. "Strangers aren't allowed." My own mother, calling me a stranger. At my sister's wedding. A wedding where every cousin, neighbor, co-worker, and random friend of a friend had been invited, except me. For a moment, I felt something inside me collapse, something old, something I'd held together with duct tape and hope. But then something else replaced it. Something quiet.
Clean.
Sharp. I straightened my shoulders. "Stranger, huh?" I said calmly. She raised an eyebrow. "Well, if that's how you see me, then I'll live like a stranger." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Alex." But I wasn't being dramatic. I felt strangely steady, calmed in a way that scared even me. "Enjoy the wedding," I said, turning away. "I won't disrupt anything. I promise." And just like that, I walked out of the reception area. No shouting. No begging. No tears.
If they didn't want me there, then fine.
I'd treat them exactly the way they treated me. I left the venue grounds and sat on a bench near the parking lot. Not to cry, but to breathe. To absorb the finality of that moment. Because for the first time in my life, I was done. Completely done. I turned off my phone, put it in my pocket, and watched the sky shift colors as the ceremony time approached. Maybe I would drive home. Maybe I would take a walk. Maybe I would just disappear for a while. It didn't matter. I didn't owe them explanations anymore. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 30. I expected nothing from that day anymore until something unexpected happened. A woman rushed outside, talking frantically into a headset. "We need someone from the family," she said. "The bride's mother's phone keeps ringing. It won't stop." I didn't pay much attention until I saw my mother rushing out of the venue, her perfectly curled hair bouncing wildly, her face pale with panic. She looked around desperately, then spotted me. For the first time in years, she looked genuinely frightened. She stormed toward me. "Alex, why aren't you answering your phone?" "Why would I?" I replied flatly. "You made it pretty clear I'm not part of the family." "Don't start that now," she snapped, but her voice trembled. "Something's wrong." I raised an eyebrow. "With who?" She swallowed hard. "Your sister." Her phone rang again, shrill, urgent. She answered shakily. "Yes? What do you mean she's crying? What happened?" What do you mean she collapsed? Collapsed where? A cold chill ran through me. My mother's face went from annoyance to confusion to horror to something I had never seen before. Guilt. Real guilt. She stared at me with wide eyes. Alex, they need you inside. I frowned. Why? Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Because, Emily, she's asking for you. I didn't move at first. Not because I didn't care, but because the words didn't make sense. My sister, Emily, the golden child, the favorite, the one mom would have wrapped in bubble wrap if she could, was asking for me, the brother she never defended, the brother she allowed to be ignored, the brother whose name wasn't even worth adding to the guest list. For a moment I wondered if this was some twisted joke, another humiliation, another performance for the relatives who loved drama more than truth. But then I saw the way Mom's hand shook, saw the way her face drained of color, saw the way she wasn't smirking anymore. This wasn't a game. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The coordinator jogged over. Sir, your mother needs to return inside immediately, she said, barely managing her composure. The bride keeps asking for her brother. She refuses to continue the ceremony until she sees him. Mom shot me a tense look. Alex, stop being stubborn and come inside. Normally, I would have let that tone roll off my back, the same way I'd done for years. But for once I didn't let her snide jab control me. You made sure I wasn't invited, I said quietly. Why would you want me inside now? She exhaled sharply, annoyed that I dared to question her. This is not the time. She's your sister. I gave her a cold smile. A stranger, remember? She froze. For the first time, she realized her own words were about to rip through the one image she cared about more than anything, how others perceived her. If I refused to go inside, the entire wedding would stall. Guests would whisper. People would talk. Her perfect reputation would crack. The golden mother of the bride would be exposed for treating her son like he was disposable. She knew it. I knew it. And for the first time, I had the power because I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. Before she could form another demand, another manipulation, another guilt trip, the coordinator spoke again. Sir, the bride is very distressed. She's been crying nonstop. She keeps saying something about an envelope and your name being on the wrong list. Mom's eyebrows pulled together in confusion, but I saw the tiny flicker of fear behind them.
She didn't know what that meant.
Good. Let her be confused for once. I stood slowly.
Fine.
But I'm only going because she asked for me. Mom stepped aside as I passed her, and it felt symbolic, her moving out of my way for once. As I walked toward the venue doors, I expected the staff to stop me again, to ask for proof, to question whether I belonged there. But the moment the coordinator called out, "He's with me," the doors opened. And ironically, for the first time that day, I felt like I was walking into somewhere. I actually belonged, not because they wanted me there, but because I chose to be there. The inside of the barn venue was chaos. Guests murmured. The groom looked anxious, pacing near the aisle. Bridesmaids were wiping tears. The officiant stood awkwardly by the archway decorated with roses and fairy lights. My extended family, who hadn't spoken to me in years unless they needed something, stared with wide-eyed confusion. Why is he here? Didn't the mother say he refused to come? Didn't they say he was causing trouble? Mom must have painted some pathetic story to make herself the victim.
Typical.
A bridesmaid spotted me and rushed over. Thank God. She won't stop crying until she sees you. Where is she? I asked. The bridal suite. I stepped through the side door, walked down a hallway filled with floral arrangements and overpriced candles, and finally reached the room. I pushed the door open quietly. Emily was sitting on the floor in her wedding gown, makeup smudged, bouquet tossed aside, veil half off, hands trembling. She wasn't the perfect bride everyone expected. She was a terrified sister with her world unraveling. Her head snapped up when she heard me. Alex. Her voice cracked so painfully it hit me like a punch. You came, I swallowed hard. You asked for me. She burst into tears and crawled across the floor toward me like a child running to safety. When she wrapped her arms around me, sobbing into my jacket, I froze. because I couldn't remember the last time she'd hugged me. Maybe we were kids. Maybe it never happened. I slowly put my hand on her back. What's going on, Em? She pulled back, wiping tears. They told me you refused to come. My entire body went cold.
Who told you that?
She hiccuped.
Mom. Dad.
Even Aunt Linda. They all said you didn't want anything to do with the family. That you laughed and said you wouldn't waste your time coming to my wedding. They told me you blocked us. My jaw locked. I didn't block anyone. She nodded through tears. I know that now. I found out this morning. The planner showed me the guest list. Your name wasn't on it. Not even accidentally removed. It was never added. Her voice cracked again. I asked Mom and she told me she couldn't finish. But I already knew. Mom told her I was too unstable, too dramatic, too disrespectful, too rude, too distant, too angry, too selfish. Whatever excuse she needed to justify cutting me out of the wedding while still looking like the victim. Emily grabbed my hands. Alex, I wanted you there. I told Mom I wanted you there. I told her you were my brother and that I didn't care what anyone said. A bitter laugh escaped me. And she ignored you. No, she whispered, eyes full of betrayal. She lied to me. She told me you refused to come. She told me to save myself from disappointment. My chest tightened, not because her words hurt, but because I realized something I hadn't noticed before. Emily wasn't cruel. She wasn't heartless. She wasn't choosing them over me. She was manipulated just as much as I was, just differently. Then I noticed it. The envelope she was holding with a death grip. What's that? She handed it to me with shaky fingers. Open it. Inside was a letter. A letter she wrote to me days before the wedding. A letter she gave to Mom to pass on. A letter that was never delivered. It said, I know we haven't been close, but I want to change that. I want you at my wedding. I want you in my life. Please come. I need you there. My throat tightened. Mom had taken that letter and thrown it away, or worse, used it to hurt both of us. Emily sobbed again. I'm so sorry, Alex. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I put a hand on her shoulder. It's not your fault. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Please don't leave.
Not today.
I don't want to get married without you there. And just like that, everything shifted. The family that threw me out. The mother who sneered at me. The humiliation at the reception desk. None of that mattered at that moment. Because my sister, my real sister, wanted me. Not out of obligation. Not out of guilt. Because she cared. I took a deep breath. Emily, I'll stay. She let out a shaky laugh of relief and hugged me again, clinging to me like she was afraid I'd disappear. But little did we know, choosing to stay would expose everything, and the entire wedding was about to erupt when the truth about Mom finally came out. Emily's grip on my hand didn't loosen as she tried to steady herself, wiping her tears as though afraid that if she let go of me for even a second, this brief moment of clarity and reunion would disappear. She stood shakily, adjusting her gown, breathing unevenly, trying to pull herself together for a wedding that had already fallen apart emotionally. The bridal suite looked like a storm had blown through. Makeup smeared across tissues, overturned perfume bottles, mascara-streaked cheeks, and a wedding bouquet that lay crushed on the rug, petals torn from being clutched too tightly. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, raw, vulnerable, and entirely stripped of the perfection she'd been raised to perform. I don't want to walk down the aisle until you're there, she whispered, voice still trembling. Everyone thinks you abandoned me. I need them to know the truth. I exhaled slowly. This is your wedding. You don't owe anyone explanations today. But I owe you one, she insisted, and her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and determination. Mom has been lying to us both for years. I don't care who gets upset today. I won't let her keep doing this. As she said that, her voice cracked, not from weakness, but from years of emotional pressure finally breaking open like a dam. I placed a hand on her arm. Whatever happens, I'm here. Right now, I'm here. She nodded, sucked in a deep breath, and reached for her veil. But the moment she lifted it, the door swung open violently. Mom stood there, eyes blazing, chest rising and falling like she'd sprinted down the hallway. The second she saw me, her lips tightened into a thin, furious line. "There you are," she hissed at me. "What did you say to her?" Emily flinched, but didn't step back. "Mom, stop." But Mom ignored her completely. "You had no right to come in here," she snapped at me. "You're making everything worse. This is her big day. Then maybe you should have invited me." I cut in sharply. The temperature in the room dropped. Mom opened her mouth, but Emily beat her to it. "Mom, why did you lie?" That one question hit Mom harder than any insult. Her whole face shifted from anger to shock to panic. "Ella? Honey, why did you tell me he refused to come?" Emily demanded, stepping forward. "Why did you say he blocked us? Why did you tell the planner not to include him on the guest list?" Mom's mouth opened and closed like she was searching for a script, the one she always used to manipulate, the one that always worked. But this time, the audience wasn't playing along. "Emily's sweetheart, I was protecting you," she finally managed. "Protecting me from what?" Emily shouted, voice cracking. "From my own brother? For God's sake, Mom, he's not dangerous. He's not unstable. He's unpredictable," Mom snapped, pointing at me like I was a wild animal she had to warn the world about. "He brings drama wherever he goes. He isolates himself. He refuses to be part of this family because you pushed him out." Emily fired back before I could. Every word she said was a dagger slicing through years of silence. "You're the one who kept him away. You're the one who twisted everything. You're the one who made me think he didn't care. Not him.
You."
Mom's lips trembled, but her anger boiled over before any remorse could surface. She pointed at the letter still clutched in my hand. "He doesn't deserve to get that letter. He doesn't deserve to be here. He doesn't deserve." "Mom," I interrupted quietly. "Why didn't you give it to me?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Her jaw clenched. "Because it would have hurt her," she said coldly, nodding at Emily. "And you always ruin things. I wasn't going to let you ruin her wedding." Emily gasped. "Ruin it? He's the only reason I'm even able to continue right now." Mom flinched like she wasn't expecting that. Emily stepped closer to her. "I asked you for one thing. One thing. To have my brother at my wedding. And you threw away my letter? You lied to me for months? You told the entire family he didn't care about me." Mom's mask finally cracked. "I didn't want him there," she screamed, her voice echoing off the walls. "I didn't want him in the pictures. I didn't want him in the videos. I didn't want him embarrassing me in front of everyone." Emily stumbled back like she'd been physically struck. I stared at Mom, not surprised, but devastated in a way I didn't want to admit. She wasn't even pretending anymore. She didn't just forget me. She didn't overlook me.
She didn't want me.
Not in her home. Not in her family. Not even in her daughter's wedding. Emily pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "Is that what this is?" she whispered. "Your image." Mom blinked rapidly, but instead of apologizing, she doubled down. "This is my daughter's wedding. I wasn't going to let him ruin it the way he ruined every holiday, every dinner, Enough!" Emily snapped so loudly the room vibrated. "Alex never ruined anything. You blamed him for everything because you couldn't handle the idea that your perfect family wasn't actually perfect." Mom recoiled as if slapped. Emily turned to me, eyes wet but fierce. "Alex, I want you to walk me down the aisle." I froze. I mean it," she said firmly. "Dad spent the morning lecturing me about family image and respectability while helping Mom lie about you. He doesn't deserve to walk me anywhere." Mom's face twisted in horror. "Emily, don't you dare. Watch me," Emily growled. She grabbed my hand again.
"Please.
Be the one who stands with me." My throat tightened. After everything, after all the years of silence, abandonment, invisibility, she was choosing me, not because I forced her to, not because she pitied me, but because she finally saw the truth. Mom lunged toward her. "You will not embarrass me like this." That was her biggest fear. Not losing her children. Not being wrong. But being embarrassed. I stepped in front of Emily instinctively. Mom's eyes burned with a mix of panic and hatred. "This isn't your place," she spat. "You don't belong here." But before I could speak, Emily said the words that shattered the entire illusion our family lived inside. "He belongs here more than you do." Mom froze. Her face strained. Her mouth twitched, but no words came out. Emily straightened her shoulders. "Alex," she said softly, "let's go." And with that, she walked past Mom, her gown sweeping the floor, her veil trailing behind her like a quiet act of rebellion. I followed her out of the bridal suite and into the hallway where shocked bridesmaids gasped, where relatives whispered, where my father appeared at the end of the corridor, face pale, realizing something was very, very wrong. But Emily didn't stop. She kept walking, kept gripping my arm, kept moving toward the ceremony doors. And as the music halted and guests stood in confusion, Emily took her place beside me at the entrance of the aisle. Mom appeared behind us, eyes wild, breath shaky, voice cracking as she whispered the one sentence she never intended to say out loud. "Please don't do this." But Emily didn't turn around. She only said, "Watch me." And then the ceremony doors opened. The instant the ceremony doors swung open, the entire room fell into a hush so deep it felt like the air itself froze. The guests, dressed in pastel dresses and tailored suits, turned their heads in unison like a slow, sweeping wave of disbelief. Every pair of eyes locked onto us, onto Emily gripping my arm instead of Dad's, onto me standing where no one expected me to be, onto the bride who was supposed to glide down the aisle with a serene smile but instead walked with a fierce, trembling determination that said something had shattered behind the scenes. The music, which had just started again after the earlier chaos, faltered awkwardly as the pianist caught sight of us, fingers slipping on the keys. The wedding coordinator waved frantically for him to continue, but even the notes came out shaky, uneven, drowned beneath the whispers rising around the room. My father stood near the front, stiff as stone, jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitching from where I stood. His eyes darted from me to Emily to Mom, who was frozen in the doorway behind us, hands trembling, mascara streaking down her face, her expression a collapsing mixture of shock and humiliation. She looked like someone watching her carefully crafted world implode in slow motion. Emily tugged my arm gently. "It's okay," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "Just walk with me." I wasn't sure my legs would move at first. The weight of hundreds of judging eyes pressed against me, years of invisibility crashing into this one moment where all the attention I never wanted suddenly suffocated me. But then Emily squeezed my hand, firm, steady, a silent promise. So I stepped forward, and the world watched. Each footstep echoed through the barn venue, thudding against the wooden floor like a heartbeat. Guests leaned toward each other, whispering urgently. I caught sentences in fragments. "Why is he here? Wasn't he the one who refused to come? Did something happen? Where's the father? Is the mom okay?" The groom, Michael, stood at the altar, eyes wide. He looked between me and Emily, confusion written all over his face, but not anger, just concern. He wasn't the problem. Never had been. He actually liked me the few times we interacted. The officiant straightened nervously, beads of sweat forming at his temple. He clearly hadn't been warned about the plot twist unfolding before him. Dad stepped forward like he might try to intervene, but Emily lifted her chin and shot him a glare so sharp he froze mid-step. It was the same glare Mom used on people who dared cross her, but this time, it wasn't to control. It was to reclaim something stolen. As we walked, I could feel Mom's presence behind us, hear her frantic breaths as she trailed a few steps back, like she couldn't accept she was no longer part of the scene she fought so hard to orchestrate. Halfway down the aisle, she choked out, "Emily, please stop, sweetheart." Emily didn't turn. Not once. Dad tried next, clearing his throat. "Emily, this isn't appropriate. You're making a spectacle." A spectacle? Emily shot back over her shoulder, still walking. "Dad, you and Mom created this spectacle. I'm just exposing it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Dad's face burned red, shame and anger swirling together. Mom shook her head violently. Emily, baby, you're emotional. You're overwhelmed. Let's handle this privately. No, Emily snapped. You don't get to hide this. The coordinator looked like she was about to faint. The bridal party was frozen at the altar, bridesmaids clutching their bouquets like props in a play that had gone horribly off script. Finally, we reached the front. Emily let go of my arm, but didn't step away. She turned to the guests, tears still on her cheeks, but her voice suddenly steady in a way only someone who had finally decided to stop being controlled could sound. Before we continue, she announced, you all deserve to know why this wedding has been delayed. A low murmur spread through the room. Mom stepped forward fast. Emily, stop this. Now. But Emily kept going. My brother wasn't invited today. Several relatives gasped. My aunt clutched her chest. The groom's mother looked horrified. In fact, Emily continued, her voice rising, my mother told the staff to remove him from the guest list. She told me he refused to come, that he didn't care about me, that he had cut contact with us. The whispering exploded into chaos. Mom lunged toward her. Emily, enough. You're ruining your own. No, Emily shouted so loudly the microphone screeched. You ruined something. I'm fixing it. Mom froze, arm halfway raised. Emily stared her down. I found the letter I wrote to him. The one I gave you. The one you threw away. Mom's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to deny it, but before she could, Emily held up the crumpled envelope. Aunt Linda, Mom's gossip partner in crime, whispered loudly, Oh my God. Emily looked out at the stunned crowd. I wanted him here. I needed him here. But my parents decided that his presence would ruin the aesthetic. They cared more about photos than family. The room erupted. Relatives stared at my parents in disgust. The groom's side looked appalled. The bridesmaids exchanged horrified glances. Dad stepped forward, face burning. Emily, this is not the place. Then you shouldn't have lied in the first place, she shot back. Mom's voice shook. I was trying to protect you. You don't understand how he behaves. Stop. Emily's voice was low, steady, deadly calm. The only person who has hurt me today is you. Mom looked like she'd been punched in the chest. Emily turned to me again. Alex, thank you for being here. I'm sorry for everything they did. My throat tightened. For once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like the outsider they tried to erase. For the first time, I felt seen. Truly seen. Emily faced the groom, who stepped closer, gently taking her hands. I'm with you, he whispered to her, ignoring the chaos behind us. Whatever you need. She nodded tearfully, then turned back to the officiant. We can continue now. The officiant stammered. Are you sure? There seems to be some family tension. We'll handle it, she said, though her voice softened, breaking a little. After. Mom suddenly broke, tears spilling. Emily, please don't do this to me. Emily didn't even look at her. She grabbed my hand one more time and squeezed it before stepping up to the altar alongside her groom. Dad stood frozen. Mom collapsed into a chair, sobbing silently, finally realizing she wasn't in control anymore. And as I stepped aside, standing among the guests, not hidden, not removed, not erased, the ceremony resumed. But nothing would be the same after today. Not the family. Not the relationships. Not the truth. And definitely not the consequences that were coming next. Because when the reception began, everything would explode. The ceremony finished, but the air afterward felt nothing like a celebration. It felt tight, electric, like the entire wedding venue was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable eruption that everyone sensed, but no one wanted to acknowledge. As the guests filtered toward the reception hall, they didn't chat about how beautiful the vows were or how lovely the decorations looked. They whispered about us. About the aisle scene. About the confrontation. About the truth Emily had blasted open in front of everyone. Mom stayed seated long after the officiant pronounced them married, staring blankly at the floor as if she couldn't comprehend how she had lost control so completely. Dad stood beside her rigidly, jaw clenched, blaming anyone but himself. Emily and Michael moved quickly to the back room for a quiet moment before reception photos, but before she disappeared, she came to me, pulled me into a hug, and whispered, "Please don't leave. Not yet. I need you here." So I stayed. Not for the family. Not for the guests. For her. As people shuffled into the reception barn, tables glowing with fairy lights, candles flickering, champagne ready, there was an undercurrent of tension so strong it felt like the floor itself vibrated. I stood off to the side, blending with the shadows near a tall wooden beam. Guests kept glancing at me, whispering like their tongues were itching for gossip. My cousin Jessica approached first, the one who always bragged about her perfect family. She spoke in a hushed voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Oh my God, Alex, I had no idea things were that bad. Why didn't you say something before?" I smiled politely. "To who? You? You all believe whatever story Mom tells." She flushed bright red and scurried away. A few others came to offer sympathy or curiosity, none of them sincere. All of them thirsty for drama. But the real storm gathered at the center table, Mom and Dad. Dad finally moved, running his hands over his face like he was trying to erase the humiliation. Mom stared blankly at the centerpiece in front of her, fingers trembling around her wine glass. She hadn't taken a sip yet, too stunned to even drink. Their friends hovered nearby awkwardly, unsure whether to comfort or avoid them. Emily and Michael emerged again, smiling stiffly for the photographer, but the moment the camera lowered, their expressions tightened. Emily gave me a tiny nod, the unspoken message clear. "Don't worry. I'm okay. But stay close." The DJ tried to lighten the mood with upbeat music, but it only made the tension feel more surreal. As appetizers were served, I took a seat near the far left wall, still close enough to see everything but not center stage. I didn't want attention. I'd gotten more today than I ever asked for. Dad approached me first. He walked stiffly, hands tucked into his pockets like he was trying to fight the urge to lecture me again. His eyes scanned a room before landing on me with an expression caught somewhere between discomfort and blame. "You shouldn't have let her do that," he said quietly, voice clipped. "That scene she made, do you understand how that made us look?" I stared at him, stunned by the sheer audacity. "How you look?" I repeated. "Dad, she stood up for me for once. And your first concern is your image." He inhaled sharply. "It was her wedding. You could have diffused the situation. Dad, I didn't cause the situation. I cut in. You and Mom did." He scowled, leaning closer. "Lower your voice." "Why?" I asked calmly. "Are you afraid people will hear the truth again?" His fists tightened, jaw ticking. There was a long, tense silence before he muttered, "Your mother is devastated." "Good," I said without hesitation. His eyebrows shot up. "What?" "She should be," I replied. "She had no problem devastating Emily or me. She's just upset the mask slipped in public." Dad's face reddened, and for a second, I thought he might yell. But then he looked around at the guests watching him and swallowed it down. "You've always been dramatic," he hissed. "You twist everything into an attack." I let out a laugh, dry, humorless. "Dad, you kicked me out when I was 18 because Mom said I raised my voice at her. You called me a disappointment because I didn't become the golden child you wanted. But sure, I'm the dramatic one." His face hardened. He stepped back, straightened his suit, and walked away without another word. Coward. But the real blow came minutes later. Emily and Michael entered the room to begin their rounds of greeting guests, but as soon as Mom saw her approach, she stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. Conversations around her fell silent. She practically ran toward Emily, grabbing her arms so suddenly the entire table flinched. "Emily," Mom whispered frantically, "you cannot keep ignoring me like this." Emily didn't flinch. Her voice was cold steel. "Let go of me." Mom's fingers tightened. "You embarrass me in front of everyone. You ruined my reputation. You ruined your own wedding. No, Emily said sharply. You did. Mom's face twisted in anger and desperation. I did everything for you. Everything. I planned this wedding. I made it perfect. Perfect. Emily laughed, but it was bitter. The only thing you cared about being perfect was the photos.
The guest list.
The narrative. Meanwhile, you cut out my own brother because you thought he wasn't good enough to stand beside me. Guests leaned in, listening even if they pretended not to. Mom's voice rose. She was unraveling. You don't understand. He creates problems. He draws attention. He always… Mom, Emily snapped. The only person who drew attention today was you. The whole room fell silent again. Mom's lip trembled. Sweetheart, please. Let's talk outside. We can fix this. We just have to spin it right. Spin it. Emily repeated slowly, her eyes widening as though she was seeing her mother for the first time. You're still thinking about spinning this? Mom moved closer. Emily, baby, listen to me. No, Emily said softly, voice breaking. I'm done listening to you. Mom stepped back like she'd been slapped. Dad stood up from the table, finally sensing things were slipping further than he expected. Emily, enough. Sit down and calm yourself. You're upsetting your mother. Emily turned on him.
Good.
Maybe now you both know how it feels. Michael stepped beside her, placing a protective hand on her back, glaring at my parents with a warning that said he was minutes away from kicking people out of his own wedding. But it wasn't over yet. Mom turned to me, eyes blazing with fresh hatred. This is your fault, she hissed. You've poisoned her against us. I stared at her. I didn't have to say anything. You exposed yourself. Her face crumpled. She opened her mouth to unleash another tirade, but before she could, someone unexpected stepped forward, Grandma, Dad's mother. The only person in that family who had ever defended me quietly, occasionally slipped me $20 bills, patted my hand, and whispered, one day they'll see what they're doing. Grandma walked right up to Mom, raised her cane, and tapped it sharply against the floor. You should be ashamed of yourself, she said loudly, her voice trembling with age but iron strong. Mom froze. Everyone froze. You've been treating him like a stranger for years, Grandma said, pointing straight at me. Disgusting behavior. And for what? Because he isn't your perfect little trophy. Mom's jaw fell open. And Mom, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Grandma snapped. And I've watched you push him out again and again. I kept quiet to keep peace. But you crossed a line today. Mom shook her head, tears spilling. Why is everyone attacking me? I'm the mother. I did what I thought was best. What's best for who? Grandma barked. You? Or your children? Silence. Utter, suffocating silence. Mom stared at her, stunned into speechlessness. Dad looked away. And I stood there, breath caught in my throat, unable to believe what I was hearing. Grandma stepped closer to me, placed a shaky hand over mine, and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear. Your family. And you deserved better than this. That's when Mom broke. She didn't just cry. She collapsed into sobs, so loud the entire reception paused to stare. But this time, no one rushed to comfort her. Not her sisters. Not her friends. Not even Dad. She had isolated herself so thoroughly in her pursuit of perfection that now, when she finally needed empathy, she had none left to receive. And for the first time in my life,
I didn't feel guilty about it.
Because Emily chose me. Grandma chose me. The truth finally came out. And the night wasn't over yet, because something even bigger was still coming. The moment Emily finished speaking, the room froze again. But this time the silence wasn't shock. It was dread, heavy and suffocating, like everyone collectively understood that what had burst open couldn't be shoved back inside. The officiant tried to stumble through the vows, his hands shaking so badly the papers rustled like a hurricane in his grip. Emily's voice trembled only once as she said, I do, but after everything that had happened, it sounded less like a vow and more like a declaration that she was choosing her own life, for the first time ever, whether our parents approved or not. Mom sat in the front row, still crying into Dad's handkerchief even though Dad wasn't comforting her. He sat stiff and furious, staring at the floor like a man who'd rather dig a hole and bury himself than face the consequences of the humiliation unraveling around him. The moment the officiant announced them husband and wife, the guests clapped, but the applause was awkward, fractured, like no one knew whether celebrating was appropriate after witnessing a family-wide implosion live on stage. When Emily and Michael walked out, hand in hand, the guests followed, whispering nonstop until the whole barn buzzed with the low hum of scandal. I stayed behind for a moment, unsure of where to go, expecting anyone, to tell me I didn't belong. But no one did. No one dared. When I finally walked out toward the reception hall, I saw the coordinator practically sprinting around, grabbing servers by the arms. Find a chair. No, 2 chairs. Move table 6. Make room. He's the brother. Yes, that brother, she yelled, her face flushed with panic. I couldn't help but smirk. It wasn't joy, it was irony. The same coordinator who'd been instructed to keep me out was now rearranging the entire floor plan to fit me in. Mom and Dad walked past me on their way out of the ceremony hall, their faces blotchy and angry. Mom glared at me with raw, open contempt. I hope you're proud of yourself, she hissed. You ruined your sister's wedding.
Dad didn't even look at me.
He just muttered, should have known you'd find a way to make this about you. For once, their words didn't hit.
Didn't sting.
Didn't break anything inside me. I only said calmly, Emily made it about me. And that's what's killing you. Mom's face twisted like she wanted to slap me right there. But she didn't. She walked away, heels pounding against the wooden floors. The reception hall was beautiful. Twinkle lights, white floral centerpieces, gold-trimmed plates, but the tension underneath it all crackled like electricity. The moment Emily and Michael entered, guests cheered louder than they had during the ceremony, almost as if they were trying to rewrite the awkwardness that came before. But everyone still kept glancing at Mom, waiting to see if she'd break again. Emily walked straight up to me before going to her sweetheart table. She hugged me again, tighter this time, like she was clinging to something she'd nearly lost. Please stay with me tonight. Please don't leave after this, she whispered urgently. I don't care if they're mad. I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. I nodded. I'm here. And I meant it. The night started normally enough. First dance, toasts, dinner being served, but beneath the smiles, conversations churned like boiling water. At one point, the groom's mother approached me, her expression soft but worried. I'm so sorry for what you've been through, she whispered. If it means anything, I'm glad you're here. The validation from someone who wasn't obligated to care hit harder than I wanted to admit. But the calm didn't last long, because when it came time for speeches, all hell broke loose. The maid of honor, Emily's best friend, Kara, awkwardly adjusted the microphone. She gave a sweet, slightly shaky speech about the couple, clearly trying to keep the night from being overshadowed by drama. But then Dad stood up, without being called, without being scheduled, without asking. He walked toward the mic like a man determined to reclaim his authority, or at least salvage his ego. I felt my stomach tighten. Emily looked instantly tense. Mom sat up straighter, eyes wide, silently begging him with her expression to fix everything. Dad cleared his throat, tapping the mic. I'd like to say something. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Kara quickly stepped aside, letting Dad take the stage. He tried to smile, but it was the forced, brittle smile of someone who doesn't know how to apologize but hates losing control even more. First off, he began, I want to congratulate my daughter and her husband. This is a special day. The pause between his words was telling.
Heavy.
But earlier, emotions were high. Words were said. Emily's jaw clenched. I could practically feel her bracing for impact. And I think, Dad continued, that certain people, his eyes flicked to me, took advantage of the moment to create unnecessary drama. It should have been handled privately, not turned into a spectacle. The room gasped quietly. I felt the heat crawl up my spine. My hands tightened into fists. Emily pushed her chair back. Dad, stop. He ignored her. Family matters should stay between family, he said firmly. And some people clearly don't understand that. His meaning was so pointed it could have drawn blood. A ripple went through the room. Judgment, shock, discomfort. Mom nodded along furiously, desperate for someone to shift the narrative so she didn't remain the villain. And Dad was trying to do exactly that. Paint me as the problem. Paint me as the disruptor. Paint me as the reason the wedding derailed. But before he could continue, before he could finish rewriting what happened, Emily stood up so fast her chair nearly fell backward. "Sit down," she said, voice sharp enough to slice glass. Dad froze, stunned that his daughter, his obedient daughter, would dare speak to him like that. "Emily, sit down." Her voice cracked, but not with weakness, with rage. Betrayed rage. Scorned rage. Dad flushed, opening and closing his mouth as guests stared, uncomfortable, waiting to see if he would escalate or retreat. He didn't move. Emily stormed up to the mic, practically shoving him aside. She grabbed the microphone with both hands, chest heaving, her veil trembling with every breath. "If anyone ruined my wedding," she said, "it wasn't my brother." She pointed directly at Dad. "It was you." Gasps detonated through the room. Mom stood up. "Emily, stop embarrassing us." "You did that yourself," Emily screamed, her voice cracking into pure heartbreak. "You uninvited my brother. You lied to me. You threw away my letter. You tried to control everything, even today. And you think you can give a speech about family?" Dad's face went dark red. Mom grabbed his arm, but he yanked it away. Emily turned to the crowd, tears spilling fast now. "I am done hiding what they do behind closed doors." Her voice wavered but didn't break. "Done pretending we're a perfect family. Done letting them control me and him." She turned toward me. "Alex, I want you to speak." The room went silent. My parents whipped their heads toward me at the same time, both looking horrified, terrified, at the idea of me holding a microphone. Because they knew exactly what I could say, exactly what I had lived through, exactly what they had done. And for the first time in my entire life, they couldn't stop me anymore.